I think we all have a handful of people in this business that we admire and respect immensely, but have never met in person. Bill Dallas, my guest, was on that list, and I met him in person, face to face, better than advertised. And that's saying a lot. Saw him at the Housing Wire Summit. We were in Minnesota about a year ago, and it was such a pleasure to meet you, Bill. I could instantly see why people are so attracted to you. You've got this magnetic personality, and it's a delight to bring you on to one-on-one. How are you?
I appreciate it. Thank you. It's good to actually spend. You're sort of iconic now. You're like the new wave of mortgage. So it's like it's like Willie Mays meeting, like uh, Otani. I
Oh
love it.
my. Wow. Well, he's very versatile, Otani. He can pitch lights out and he
He
can
can
hit home
pitch,
runs lights
hit.
out. So I'll take that very much. But I think all roads lead through you and a bunch of people in this business, the David Lickens of the world, who I respect a lot, Dave Savage, Barry Habib. I mean, there's a bunch of you that have been around for, quite a long time. Sue Woodard, I'd put her in that group. So many incredible people in our industry. And we're in a moment in time here, and I cannot wait to get your thoughts on where we are, both sort of from 30,000 feet, but also on the ground level where there's a lot of chaos in Washington. And I know you've got opinions on that. Let's start with just a little background on you. I know you've run Dallas Capital now for just under 30 years. You last, I think, in the IMB space were the president of Finance of America.
Yep.
You opened up a very successful mortgage company in 1981. And Cloud Virgo was a company that you helped found, and that was sold to Stewart Title. So you've had so much success. I'm probably missing so many things. What are you up to these days?
Well, Dallas Capital, right? In '94, I sold First Franklin for the first time, and I sold that business three times. And so in '94, a long time ago, but it's similar to this market today. In '94, I started Dallas Capital, and so and what I've done over 25 years, even while starting mortgage businesses or running it, is really helping entrepreneurs and business people help their community. So Dallas Cap, my wife and I have run that business forever. And then when I left Finance of America after taking them public in during COVID, which was another odd experience, um, one of the things that I did was get back to working with clients. So I have, you know, anywhere between 6 and 15 clients that I help in mortgage banking. And they're anything from small fintech things and ideas that I think actually work to real mortgage bankers who are struggling trying to get things done.
Yeah, we're going to bounce around a lot here, so buckle your seatbelt because I like to jump around and there's so much to cover. Before we do that, a name popped in my head. It's always tough when you start naming names of legends in our business, but I absolutely put Cindy Ertman up there with the rest of the names that I mentioned. So I just want to mention her while I can. Uh, Marsha Davies would be another one. So want to make sure that I mention a few things. You mentioned that you sold your business. You were back into the business three times, right? Is that the
First Franklin was the
yeah?
gift that kept on giving, right? But
Yeah. So I
I
want
think
to, in that context, I want to, and I will bounce around a lot here. I want to ask you about the return of Anthony Heish to Loan Depot because he's returning in a way. I mean, he never really left, I guess, because he had a chairman's position. But what are your thoughts on what's going on over there and why he might be back?
I think the when stocks get, especially if you watch the public, it's very difficult for public mortgage bankers, right? Because we get whipsawed, and that's why there's really only been a couple over the last 30 or 40 years, countrywide probably being the most successful for 25 or 30 years. Um, and what you see is when the stock price gets back down below $2, a dollar, right? You start the board starts calling for reinforcements, and I think Anthony never. I mean, I've known him for probably 30 years, and I think there's when you have to get in a foxhole and save your business, and they got plenty of cash. they're not going anywhere. It's just being a public company in this space is extraordinarily difficult. And I think the board basically said, we need all hands on deck, and we need the skipper back, and we need him back now to help us try to uh, right the ship. And I think, especially in a market like this, because we could be in this market for another, 12 to 24 months.
How do you define this market? Just tough, right? You got to work and fight and scratch and
It's
claw,
more
rate
than tough.
compression, all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two things that are extraordinarily different about this market are there's low inventory, low to no, right? Inventory, even though it could be growing, tons of equity, yet people aren't really accessing it as much as we would think. And then I think the third piece are either flat to rising interest rates, right?
Yeah.
Because if you check back to 94, where we are in 1994, you're looking at a market where interest rates went up 7 or 8 times by the Fed. And you're looking at today where you've basically seen interest rates go from 2 or 3 to 6 or 7.
Yeah, so I want to talk about today. That's why I'm looking at my phone. I'm not distracted. I'm way locked in, Bill. So don't you worry about me. I'm looking at the words that you shared on your LinkedIn post because it's very relevant to today. These are your words. Between the stock market crashing, Trump's game of revolutionary tariff whack-a-mole, the U.S. sharply pivoting away from its historic geopolitical allies, and an ongoing war in Ukraine, mortgage bankers need to stay focused, can't get enough protection against volatility. We will make this worth your while. So the moment we're in right now, I mean, how would you characterize it, and how do you feel about the direction the economy is forcefully heading in right now?
Yeah, I mean, if I set the stage, it's really an interesting time because of all the things that you just said that I said, right? Which is, I think we're getting used to Trump a little bit, but if you look at higher interest rates and affordability strains on the mortgage market, let's just set the stage for real mortgage bankers. Higher interest rates, affordability strains, no inventory or low inventory. MAGA and Trump really means less regulation, just in general. The CFPB and Dodd-Frank probably mean that referrals and comp plans are out of the penalty box. I don't think there's any way, shape, or form that a Redfin rocket deal gets done in a prior administration. There's some view that that real estate and mortgage should be together. And as you guys know, we spent the last decade pulling it apart or smacking it around. So realtors are now in the penalty box. Real estate companies have spent gazillion dollars settling a class action lawsuit on the buy side. So you actually then see Compass potentially buying Berkshire Hathaway. You also see the massive change announced at the same day, where Stone Point actually made an investment into Keller Williams, and Gary stepped down. All those things are realtor penalty box buy side change. There's a growing climate and insurance risk to home values, which is obviously half of California in Southern Cal was burning. You have higher rents. You have record home ownership equity and cash out, which consumers aren't taking cash out. You now got a bunch of data that's showing that everybody is pinging their credit cards. So we're actually going into I think, potentially a credit event. And then you've got the demographic shift from which I'm going to call barbell between Gen X, Y, Z, and boomers. And then I think the final two that are big would be there's the single family residence is no longer a single family residence. It's evolved into multi-use. And that throws in question what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac actually do, which is owner occupied single family primary occupant, home. And then I think you've got, as a result, people don't qualify. Guidelines haven't changed in 75 years. So you've got non-agency products taking over and the chance that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac could go private. So other than that, there's nothing.
Not much happening other than that, huh?
No,
Oh
and
man, I've
then
got.
you try to prepare as a LO. I think the loan officer business is, to some extent, FUBAR.
All right, well, break that down for me. What do you mean by that?
I mean, loan officers who, I think the market, there's only a few that do extraordinarily well. There's a lack of productivity. There's a high cost to produce, and I think the model itself is maybe falling in on itself just from a cost standpoint. And you need to deliver a great price to the consumer, and that price gets eaten up in a ton of costs.
We've seen the broker share pick up here. Matt Ishbia.
Way up.
Matt
Yeah.
Ishbia had a post the other day on LinkedIn, and he should be taking a bow. I mean, you can't, whether you're on the broker or the lending side, you've got to respect what was happened over there. 27.4% is the number. And I posed the question, a LinkedIn post of my own, saying, what happens first? 20% down to 20 or up to 35? In the past, as you know, having been in this business for so long, the pendulum swings. We get into rate compression, people go to broker, and then things loosen up, people go to lender. This has a very different feel because of some of the advancements technologically. I think we get to 35 before we get to 20. What's your opinion? What's your opinion about the channel in general as well?
One of the things that I wrote an article about a decade ago or so on that anybody who has a 50% market share coughs it up in mortgage. And it's been true since I started, right? Because when I first started, there was no such thing as an independent mortgage bank, really. And there were no brokers, right? So you had banks and savings and loans. And then suddenly you've got SNLs becoming the asset of envy. Everybody's a savings and loan. They get up to a 50, 60% market share. What happens? They bomb. Banks then take over. Then mortgage, and they get a 50 or 60% market share. And then it was independent mortgage banks. Then it was brokers. I mean, back in 03 and 04, over 50% of the business was mortgage broker to independent mortgage bank, right? And First Franklin owned businesses that I had were exclusively wholesale, right? Or TPO. And then after 06, 07, back on the bus, right? We have compliance changes, all kinds of issues. Everybody runs to retail. Retail grows. So I would say to you, right, I think we're in the middle of this shift again. And what my point has always been that you can own a portion of the 50% of the market share from time to time. But because of demographic shifts, because of all the things that I just laid out, it's very difficult to stay on top. And right now you're experiencing banks retreating. There is no such thing as an SNL. You've got independent mortgage banks who actually took over. Maybe it's 65, 70% market share. You got brokers growing. And I think that is the next big retreat.
What is, brokers or lenders?
I think independent mortgage banks at a 70% market share. I mean, there's too many of them, and they don't make enough money, and it's a struggle in a high interest rate environment. And for all the things I just said, I mean, and we are tethered. Independent mortgage banks are tethered to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the government. And I think
that's for sure. So as IMBs pull back a little bit from that 65, 70 number, you see that going the way of the broker, or do you think banks will reemerge?
I think banks. Don't underestimate banks. I think you have so this is, I left one out, right, which is probably the return of Wall Street, which is, I think you're seeing that right now, right?
Now, are you talking about mortgage-backed
non-agency,
securities or something
all
else?
of that.
Okay.
No, I think it's non-QM, non-agency, SFR, HEI contracts. I think there is plenty of money in America to get to from Wall Street to Main Street via securitization, via whole loan buys, or whatever, for what I'm going to call SFR products, single family residence products that are not agency. Big time.
So how do we close the gap on an inventory perspective? Are you up?
Yeah, I think
Do you think zoning laws should be changed, or do you have another idea?
Well, I mean, if you look at the hyperactivity that maybe, Greg, that we're going to have in California to try to figure out what to do with, the fire locations with both Eaton and with the Palisades. I mean, I've got a Christian school that's based there. We probably have, I don't know, 75 families that are affected. So I think I think you're going to see one of the challenges, which is if you start changing regulations, which I think MAGA and the government wants you to do, that it butts up against this problem of growing climate change and insurance risk. And I
Yeah.
actually think it's going to be a challenge to there. It's my wife and I own a business that we run in Minnesota. She's a contractor and a builder developer, and there's nothing like the cost of materials and how fast that they have gone up and how expensive it is to build.
Well,
So
and
there's
that's
very
also,
little
yeah, with the
in
tariffs, that's going to
affordable
continue to
housing
go
that's
up.
available to us.
Yeah, tariffs aren't going to help that very much. We talked a little about Redfin and Rocket, and obviously we've touched on UWM. There's a lot of directions you could take all those names, but the
Oh
name
my
we haven't
gosh.
really mentioned is Zillow. They did $7 billion last year in mortgages. They're in the game now, and that's a big number. I mean, $7 billion is a good enough number to take note and say, well, what's going on here? So, what do you think their next move is, if you had to guess,
Well,
having advised
they've
so many
already bought
leaders
into
and businesses?
mortgage by buying the McGovern's business, right? So they're in mortgage. I do think search and qualify, what I've always said, and really when I started building Cloud Virgo, one of the thoughts that we had is that search, so in our business, right, with you and I starting, I'm a loan officer, started, uh, I would basically spend all my time with realtors, going on tour, looking at properties, and that was my marketing, right? I think once the MLS was democratized, and you have these sites that people can search all the time, they're constantly looking, right? So everybody's in the market all the time and never with their realtor or with their client. So I think one of the biggest challenges, and that was one of the cool things that I think about. So as the regulations unbundled, really, referral partners, even touching a realtor, even saying hello to them, you had to pay them. You don't pay them if you MSA. You either had a joint venture, an MSA, desk rental, or some. Everything needed to be hyper compliant. You've moved. If you move away from that, I think you get the opportunity. I can see a future where search and qualify live together, realtors and mortgage people combine. And I think you can save, if you can save 2, 3, 4% on the buy side plus fees from a mortgage, and you can figure that out. I think there's something there. And I've got 2 or 3 clients today in mortgage banking that are actually partnering in a deeper way with realtors in order to do that. And you could read in the fine print. And I think that's really what the Redfin, Zillow, and whatever happens from here with Rocket or somebody else, is I think you're going to see a movement to try to save costs in
Well,
the
Bill, I don't think
process.
anything you're talking about is good for IMBs. I feel
I
like
think could be.
no, I don't
Yeah.
think it is good for IMBs. I feel like let me just paint a picture for you. Realtors and LOs, they get to work together. Um, Referral fees, maybe like you said, out of the penalty box. Potential RESPA reform, which hasn't been reformed for 50 years. I see an environment where the disparity between the haves and the have-nots really widens, and the companies that have the money that can invest or overpay to get market share are going to win, and it's going to really hurt the smaller IMBs. Am I just making up a story, or is this plausible?
No, it's plausible. And I think it's my job. It's what I do with IMBs is I try to get them to understand the that there's in confusion or in volatility, there's tremendous opportunity. But you have to be strategic and focused and mindful and intentional. You can't just wind up there.
All right, so with
It
that in
isn't going to
mind,
work that way.
let's pretend like you're talking to the everyday IMB right now. You're sitting across the table from a CEO, and they're trying to figure out what the landscape looks like. How are they going to make it deal with these headwinds and the competition? What are a couple pieces of advice that you would give?
Yeah, so I each year with my clients, I I try to give them a survival mechanism first. So first survive. Uh, you got. I use DLM. Don't lose money, and I add an M, moron. Uh, and if you can't lose money in your business, so no matter how much, and you can't produce your way out of it. So this is an expense thing. So what I do after getting past that pop in the face is um, I think 2025 you can, and I use Thrive in 25, and Thrive is an acronym, right? And I start with everything's an opera threat or everything's a threat opportunity. There's no such thing. There's opportunities and challenges, but your job is to try to figure out strategies that allow you to take those threats and turn them into opportunities. So here are the five, right? In Thrive. Take advantage of the major themes that I just went through, and there's tons of equity in this market. So this is a cash out market that isn't materializing. So you've got to figure out, how am I going to access that and get better? And mortgage bankers are purchase driven, right? The whole industry is around an affordable purchase. Everything else gets slaughtered. And the two most effective products are non-QM, HELOCs and IOs, interest only loans. So you got to figure that out. H, right? Help your clients get the cash out, right? R, you've got to reduce your cost to originate. So I don't care how you do it, you have to reduce the cost so you can compete better for each loan, because you've got to offer. It's going to be a dogfight to try to help these clients get cash out, because there's so many other options. So you're going to have to be ready, probably with a separate comp plan. The I is for IOs. IOs and non-QM products, whether they're flips, ADUs, rehabs, DSCR, HEI. I mean, there's so many opportunities there to help clients, but
Yeah.
you're going to have to get there. V is volume. You're going to struggle with volume, especially profitable volume. And then I think the E is, now we're starting to get more into how I could help you become more efficient. Because if you're not efficient, you don't get the right to go forward and take advantage of these opera threats or these opportunities that go forward. And then I start building. I tell mortgage banks, I said, mortgage banking firms that sell all their servicing create no value, right? They're just leases, liabilities, and loan officers. So, and so as you have to create a valuable business, right? And value means you're making money. You are probably agency and non-agency masters, where you can go back and forth no matter what. You probably have multi-channels, because not every channel fits every client, right? And I think you probably retain servicing. and you've got some macro hedge, right? When I sold First Franklin in 1994, I had close to $10 billion of servicing back then. So I think in the way the business is set up, it's going to change, right? Because you can't have mortgage bankers. You can't have the client going to the lender, which then goes to a correspondent, which then goes to an aggregator, which then goes to a agency or non-agency. It then goes to an MSR buyer, and it finally gets to the investor. Okay, if I'm a client, I have no idea where my loan is. And we saw that in forbearance. We see it in client retention.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do this and do this well and take advantage of this, your strategy has to be to build something valuable in as this market continues to evolve.
That's a hell
Because
of a
it's
blueprint,
going to
Bill.
change.
That's a nice blueprint. I like that. This is that's sticky. You covered a lot of bases there and totally off the cuff. You've been asked that question before, I think. Um,
Yeah,
what's your BHAG, man? I know you're a BHAG guy.
I am. I think personally or
Yeah, just
professionally.
whatever. What's your personal BHAG and what should the industries be, you think? And just for everyone's knowledge, that stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious
Audacious goal.
Goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you don't have a BHAG, so personally, it's help other people, right?
Yeah,
It's help you. I mean, I spend my life. I've been very successful. I'm going to give you, my pastor a long time ago drew a cross, and I don't care what your faith is or anything else, it'll have some meaning to you. And he basically said, let's there's two axes, and the one axis is, and I'm just going to use two words: success on the X, and and I can tell you that success is fleeting. Success is a floor, but once you achieve it, whatever your definition of that is, you have to have more. A big, hairy, audacious goal is about more. And so on the y-axis, I've it's significance. So how can you build something? And so when I look at businesses and when I look at individuals, I'm looking for people who want more, who want to be significant, who've had a modem of success, and want to build something that puts a dent in the ecosystem of the planet in some way. And they're not just here taking up space. And I think most people, Greg, that's why I like you, right? That's why we met, right? I saw you, I searched you. Why? You are putting a dent and trying to change and thinking seriously about how to remarket, how to interact with clients, how to become and use the current toolbox to actually do what we do better. That's exciting to me, right?
Well,
It always has been.
well, I appreciate the kind words coming from you. It carries extra meaning. It really does. And I know you had mentioned a minute ago, and I don't want to just gloss over this. It's so significant that you founded one of the largest Christian schools in America in Thousand Oaks. Tell us about it, please.
You know, I thought when I sold my businesses, and I was 39, right? Initially, I'm still young. But at that time I thought this is unbelievable. It's the greatest thing I've ever been associated with. And then I started Oaks Christian. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to put a dent in and change education. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a teacher. My dad ended up being a school superintendent, my mom a principal, and so I was steeped in education. And one of the frustrating things about education is nothing's changed. In Same thing in mortgage, right? Nothing's changed. You still go into a classroom and things were the same. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to actually change, innovate, and keep faith and integrate it into an educational background. So what we've built over the last 25 years is probably one of the nation's largest private independent Christian schools. We actually also have an international school because I think it's important for our students. We're so myopic in America until recently. I think COVID sort of sent us all over the place, but it was like we focus our efforts on America. Well, this is a planet, it's a world. There's so many things that are unique. And so we built that. So today we're looking at a school that has a couple thousand students, right? 4 through 12. We're going to go K through 4 next. And we're in a very expensive market in California. So we have to figure out how to have a same as we would in mortgage, right? How do you retain people in a very expensive market? How do you assist people so that they can afford it? And we're no feeder. We have no feeder system, so we've had to do this all on our own. So a lot of it's financing, a lot of it is just how we structure it, but it is by far the most consequential asset and thing I've ever been associated with.
Remarkable. Congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you.
You know, some people talk about making an impact on the world and others do it, and clearly you're a doer, and I really appreciate that. I just have a couple of really quick ones for you and then we'll let you go. Do you think that you may ever end up at the helm of another IMB again?
I don't know. I mean, I think my skill set. I'm at a. I'm more at when you're a strategy, right, and you're operator. Sometimes it gets confusing because you've got to be good at both. And sometimes those skill sets. I mean, the COO and a production person and these are hard skill sets today to
Yeah.
develop because it's so integrated. I I've been approached. I haven't found the right thing that I would want to totally do, and I'm really enjoying spending time with. I've always said, whether you're Patty and Rick, or whether I was going to say Chris George, or you're Casey, or you're Victor, or you're all these guys who own these businesses, right? It's lonely at the top.
Well, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to stop you there because you just mentioned, some of the goats, but hardly any of them ever speak up. And this is
Yeah.
really why I started doing what I'm doing. This is 18 months ago. I made a post. I said, "Where are the voices? Why aren't these leaders pushing back against the rate environment and the gouging of credit prices?" And I called out Casey Crawford. Did nothing. Patty and Rick, Victor, Ron at Cross Country. Like, these are incredible leaders. These are people that are doing amazing things. Matt Ishbia, right? I mean,
Mhm.
wow, right? These are people that
Mhm.
know how to win in our business. Why do you think, since I think all of the names I just mentioned, why do you think that there's such a void there? Why don't we hear more from them? Not just talking about their companies, but about the industry that has provided so much for so many.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm going to give you one of the guys that I work for. Um, initially, when I started in the business, he was an extraordinary man. Fred Clark was his name, and he was at Paul Clark Realty when I was in Ohio. And I just came out of college, so I didn't know shit about anything. And he basically said there's three stages in life, and one is competing with yourself, one is competing with others, and the third is helping other people. And he goes, "Hey, Bill, where are you?" I said, "Man, I am helping other people. That's what I want to do." And he goes, "You are so far from that it's embarrassing. I can't even believe that you think because, and if you really think about when you are in battle, like all these guys are today, and they think they are in battle. They're competing. They've stopped competing with themselves and they've moved to competing with others, but they haven't moved to helping other people. And that's why they just
Yeah.
they
Well, I
can't
mean,
help
they
themselves.
the thing is, they all do like what Casey's done with schools.
They
Uh,
can do so much.
Unbelievable. Steve
Yeah,
Jacobson. Oh my goodness. I mean, I hear he has a whole floor dedicated to charity. Like, why aren't
yeah.
these people to Steve, open up the floor. Let us see what you're doing for others. It's just going to make us want to do more. Everyone lives in their own little world, and I think they've got it wrong. Like, there's an opportunity to really make a bigger impact than closing more loans and clobbering the people that they compete against. Now, granted, they're all in their communities doing exceptional things.
Hmm.
It would just be nice to hear more from them, because I think from the outside looking in, it's easy to come to a conclusion, not that any of them give a shit, that you're just so rich and so well off that it's just beneath you. And I know half the people I just mentioned. That's not who they are. They care deeply,
I
right?
do.
It would just be nice for them to show us a little bit more. I want to ask you before we go, Mike Cush, who's a really talented guy in his own right, he took my last topic for you, and that's the NBA. That's the Mortgage Bankers Association. I can't have a conversation with you without asking about how you feel about them. I've gone back and forth with them some. I truly respect them. They're so vital to the ecosystem that we're living in. It would be terrible to not have them around, but I feel like they're at a crossroads too. They've gotten
Yes.
so big. They've got a lot of interests, right, on both the vendor side and now the lender side, and it's concerning to me. I've called it out,
Hmm.
and it's caused friction between me and them, quite frankly, and they're not shy about that. So, I don't know to what extent you can comment on how you feel, and whether you want to dive right in the deep end here, or maybe get in where it says 4 feet. But I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up because I think, look, it's another way of giving back. It's a very confusing thing when you get to the size of the NBA, because I've been with the NBA for 40 years, and you have little NBAs, right? So each state has an NBA and everybody struggles. So I've been involved in California's, Colorado's, places where I've lived, and with the NBA itself. I think Dave Stevens, Brock Smith, right? You can go back through the lineage of people that lead. I think where we are today with it is that that with Marcia and leadership, it's a very tough line to try to lobby on behalf of its constituents and still be the beacon with respect to real estate finance on Wall Street, Main Street, regulations, dealing with all the ancillary groups that affect us, lawsuits, all of that. So they do an extraordinary job, but it gets a bit diluted. And I think one of the things that we do, I'm going to use Oaks Christian for a second, and Greg, you can probably echo it as a mortgage person, right? Once you lose sight of your client, and in the mortgage business, it is our buyer or it's our homeowner, right? Could be our LO, right? Or could be our broker. But at the end of the day, we have a client. At Oaks Christian, the main thing is the main thing, which is the student. And in MBA, the main thing is the IMB. And I think when you try to please the IMB, the IMBs have got varied interests, right? From whether you're Mr. Cooper or your new res and your big servicer or your small independent mortgage broker or a mortgage bank, all those people, at the end of the day, they have to focus and continue their focus on the client, which is the independent mortgage bank, right? And they have to understand what we're going through and be able to provide not only services and things, but also leadership with respect to regulation, with respect to compliance. And I think sometimes we tightrope and walk a line that we try to please both sides. Well,
Do you think they've gotten too big, or lost their way a little bit?
I think they're just big. And when you got big, it's like me running when I first started First Franklin on Franklin Street in Santa Clara when I was going to law school and I had 15 people. That's different than 5,000 people in a public company at Finance of America. I mean, that's a big move for a little guy like me. And so it's two different worlds, because when I ran Finance of America, it sucks you in to want to be, all you want to talk about is all the shit in the bottom side of the beach ball: compliance, regulatory, comp plan, blah, 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 not letting money, versus what I like about what I do right now is all the things I just told you. These are the things that you have to do to build a company that's successful in today and over the next couple of years. And
The
so you
bottom
have to be
size,
focused on you.
the bottom side of the beach ball. I love that. That's pretty
Yeah, I
great,
mean,
man.
one of the things that my consultant always said to me is you can't see both sides of a beach ball. And mortgage people have a tendency, especially because we're production focused, see the top side.
So
Well, the
I'm gonna
bottom
let
side actually, the bottom side's got some problems and
I'm
some
gonna let you
things. And
go. I am gonna let you go in a second. I know you like the book Good to Great. I'm sure you'd recommend that by Jim Collins. I heard you talk about it. I just want to get this stuff out here. That I want to just go through my notes real quick. Balance sheet BS is bullshit. I got that from something I listened to. And then
hey,
this is how this,
P&L,
Bill.
what most of the
This,
guys think of P&L is profit and loss, and I actually think it is people and leadership.
yeah, and that's what I want to get to, because
Yeah.
I heard you say that a company's biggest asset is its people. And so in closing here, because I know you're a leadership guy, look at what you've done. You've lived leadership. How can someone identify the right leader for them, and the other side of the coin too? Like, there are a lot of people out there that are working for bad leaders. And I just want you to how do you approach looking at that dichotomy?
Yeah, the most important thing that you have I look at my team, my leadership team, and my people in my organizations as an Olympic team. And we only have so many slots. So I'm going to be, um, I, I, I want a team. I want to build a team. So you don't have to be the best. I mean, it's not about talent. It's about grit, perseverance, and it's also about your ability to be a good teammate. And one of the things that when I played sports in high school and college, and it probably defined me, still does to some extent. And my they always have a scouting report on you, and I love my scouting report. It's not the biggest, it's not the fastest, not the strongest, not the smartest. The one thing, he wins. The teams that he plays on always win. By the
If I
way,
didn't know you were describing you, you could have easily been describing Tom Brady.
I mean, well, Tom's 6'5", so he's got some skills,
Yeah, that's it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, I agree with you, right? You don't have, so leading a team of people, you have to communicate, and you're only as good as really your weakest links. So you have to build them up so they feel important. And in mortgage, one of the things that we've learned is that the offense and the defense generally they can hate each other just as they can in any other sport. So I think what you have to do is, whether you're production or ops, it's all about people. It's all about culture, and it's all about building a framework where people feel valued. And look, I've had people say, well, you've closed businesses down, you've shut things down, you've done well, dude. The number one job is the team has to survive. We have to survive first. And so part of the problem today is that mortgages got massive headwinds that are keeping them from being successful. And at some point, this is going to clear. And where do you want to be? And I think trying to get with individuals, you're trying to find like-minded people who are just gritty, but they believe in the team and they believe in the ability to do that. And that's not everybody in mortgage.
No, for sure. Well, Bill, this has been a riveting 40 minutes or so. We normally go about
Jeez.
25-ish, but there was just way too much to cover and it flowed too well to cut it short. So I just want to thank you very much. The audience, I know, enjoyed it, and they'll be listening to this on our podcast replay and all that good stuff. So thank you so much for all you've done and continue to do for this industry, and look forward to getting closer to you in the months and years ahead.
You too, Greg. I appreciate it.
All right, that's
Thank you,
Bill
guys.
Dallas, chairman of Dallas Capital. Coming up next Monday, Brendan McKay, co-founder of the Broker Action Coalition. They're doing incredible stuff on the Hill, and they've got a big event coming up. We're going to talk about Trigger leads the trigger bill because it may be re-emerging. That's next Monday. Have a great week, everyone. Until then, so long.